This is 9727, the book, Chapter 1 to Chapter 10. Autumn had just started to paint the sky with those colourful and melancholic shades. He couldn't help but notice that his tan was slowly fading. The gold on his skin was adjusting to the dimmed lights in the sky. For sure it was a good summer, he thought, as he was reminiscing on those days on the beach in Barcelona. He grabbed his phone and started swiping back and forth some of the pictures he took while in the marvellous capital of Catalonia. He remembered the taste, the colour, and the scent of every incredible thing the city had to offer. His train was approaching the platform. The public announcement stormed him out of his dreams. Train to Paris on gate number 4. He looked at the heavy machinery as if it was Hermes, the messenger of the gods. "Am I ready for this life?" he muttered under his breath. Right before he stepped inside the wagon, he took a glimpse at the people sitting. It was still early in the morning, and you could tell that most people weren't really excited about the idea of being on a train, on their way to work probably. The whole concept of going someplace you don't really want to go, to do something you're tired of doing, still amazes him. But there she was, the only person who dared wear a smile in such an austere environment. That little girl must have been 6 or 7, and she was serious about not letting people's frown ruin her good mood. She was staring at him as an invitation to join her in her smiling protest. So he did. He smiled at her, and it felt like they both made each other's day. Judging by the way she was dressed up and how she was holding her mum's hand, he assumed that today was her first day at her new school, and clearly she was going to make it count. He sat in the row in front of the little princess. That way he could see that innocent smile. He thought it was a sign that today was going to be very special for him too. As the train was getting closer to the city and his final destination, he started to feel that tingling sensation that he knew too well. He has been in those situations where he needs to dig deep down to find the strength to tame the introvert part of himself. He kept thinking about that phrase that he read the other day. If you start being partially unconvinced about convincing others, you will end up totally convinced that the idea to convince others isn't convincing enough. He definitely needed to make a good impression and show some confidence. He felt his phone vibrating through his pocket. He took it out and read the text that he just received. "Be great. Be the extraordinary, convincing person I know you are. I keep you in my prayers." And that was the perfect message at the perfect time. At least it was enough to chase away some of the doubts that he was having. Charisma, of course. The man has a very charismatic way to present himself, and on a good day he has the kind of confidence that could sell encyclopedias to Instagram models. So why is he even worried that things could go wrong? It's just chaos inside his head. Sometimes it feels like the best way to not disappoint is to not show up at all, to not stand out, and definitely not make a sound until, just until. Chaos is also emptiness making loud sounds. The train stops again. 2 more stops before it reaches the Gare du Nord station. He looked at his watch and concluded that he was going to be at least 40 minutes early to the appointment. Before he even started to think about how he could avoid showing up too early, his eyes picked up on something, or rather someone, entering the wagon. Finally, his brain caught up. She was definitely the most beautiful woman he saw in a very long time, and he wasn't the only one whose heart suddenly skipped several beats. Clearly, that woman was used to the finest things in life, and it showed by the clothes that she was wearing. A simple and yet sophisticated combination of colours and style, like a very edgy Brazilian night in an exclusive speakeasy. The lady was wearing an orange and black coat with a blue dress underneath, and her shoes' sole were as red as her lipstick. She was walking at a very calm pace, like a dangerous feline circling around its prey, even though she was purposely avoiding eye contact. But he wasn't a fool. He knew that her doing so wasn't because of shyness or humility. Against all odds, she stopped her progression right next to him and started to make her way to the seat between him and the window. As she brushed past him, getting in her seat, he smelt her perfume, and as expected, the scent didn't disappoint. That's probably what heaven smells like, he thought to himself. Suddenly, she stood up and quickly ran towards the exit as the door's signal was still on, and she got outside a second before the doors closed completely. He looked through the window to see if he could have one last glimpse of her silhouette before the train left the station, but he couldn't see her anywhere. As he scooted over to the seat closer to the window to see if he could have a better point of view, he felt something unusual on the seat. He looked down and saw a cellular phone. He could have sworn he didn't see it before, so it must belong to the woman who left it in a hurry. She must have dropped it by accident, he thought. But that was until he saw what was on the screen. He couldn't be any more shook as he discovered the message on the lock screen. Mr. Tishu, now that we have your attention, use the code 9727 to unlock the phone. I don't think you can truly comprehend the level of stress that situation put him in. How his name ended up on this phone. How? Someone tell me how, please. He kept repeating in his head. Wait. Is there someone looking at him right now? Someone willing to hurt him? He quickly scanned the whole wagon looking for a suspicious look or someone who would be straight up staring at him. But no one was even paying attention to him, which added to the stress. He felt observed. Obviously someone went out of their way to place a cellular phone in his hands. That lady was an accomplice. Of course, she was part of it. Why would someone like her get on this type of train? Whoever planned that must have followed his every move and whatnot. There was only one way to find out what this whole masquerade was about, he concluded. He looked back at the phone and entered the code, 9727. The phone was unlocked and looked completely normal. A black background with only 5 app icons, a photo gallery, a text sending app, a map with GPS, and he couldn't place the 2 others. One had a Joker face on it and the other one was a flower. A rose, apparently. Suddenly the phone vibrated. A message was received. He proceeded to open the message. At this point, he had no idea what to expect, but his curiosity was triggered and he mentally prepared himself. The text said, "Have a look at the photos in the photo gallery." He found that odd, but still opened the... "Just what in the hell is going on?" he said out loud. The first photo was a photo of himself getting dressed in the privacy of his bedroom. The second was a photo of him getting in the Uber earlier, and as he kept going, he became even more horrified. The following photos were photos of some members of his family in their houses too. The phone vibrated again, and he received another text message. Fear was getting the best of him. He opened the message, and what he saw was so devastating that he dropped the phone and used his now free hand to cover his mouth. What the hell is going on? He still couldn't believe what his eyes had just looked at. He eventually picked the phone back up in his hand and took another look at the screen. He was looking at a picture of himself laying on his back in a body bag at the morgue, in one of those long drawers that they usually put dead bodies in. What kind of evil-minded sicko would prank me like that, he thought. Still dubious as to whether or not the photo was photoshopped. The ruckus he caused didn't miss on drawing attention to him from the other passengers. The smiling little girl was now looking at him with apprehension and confusion. He decided to get up and get ready to leave the train at the next station. He was still agitated and didn't feel safe anymore. He needed to be in a known environment. He needed to have more control over the situation because his mind couldn't really deal with the amount of information sent to his brain all at once. He reached the doors. The train was still whizzing. He turned his back to the doors to keep an eye on the people on the train. He managed to get his own cell phone out of his coat pocket. He needed to make sure his family was not injured or under any kind of threat. He scrolled through his contacts when suddenly he heard some sort of panicking amongst the other passengers. They were all looking at the windows, and the sound of anger was growing. That's when he realised, horrified, that the train wasn't making a stop at the next station. As a matter of fact, it was going way faster than it needed to, causing people to lose their nerves and to worry about what was going on. "What is happening, for God's sake?" someone shouted from the back of the wagon. He heard a woman screaming from the opposite direction. It was total chaos. Suddenly, the mysterious cell phone started ringing. The sound was very loud, as if the evil maniac who set it up wanted to make sure he would hear the phone through the commotion. That disturbed mind also recorded the calling number as, "You have 20 seconds to take that call or else you die." It took him at least 10 seconds to fully realise what was asked of him, but eventually he picked up the phone, after 2 more seconds, 12 in total. "Who's this?" he said right after he picked the call. Nothing on the other end. "Who the hell are you?" he said with anger and fright, but probably because the train was picking even more speed and he didn't feel as if things were getting better. He finally heard static noise on the speaker. He could barely understand the voice over the very loud white noise. He could only guess it belonged to a woman. The woman said, "It starts with 9, and then..." But he couldn't hear the rest. "9 what?" he repeated. Then he heard another voice, which sounded familiar. "You can trust me on that," the voice said, and the noise took over again, and he wasn't able to hear the rest. Eventually the noise became so loud that he had no other choice but to put the phone away from his ear. He was even more confused and could hardly figure out what was going on. It felt like a movie and a nightmare. Completely unreal, and yet he could feel every hair on his neck stand up. Instantly after that last thought, a very loud sound broke loose, and shortly after that the entire train was blinded by a very vivid light, so powerful that everything around him turned completely white. The sound of the ruckus was suddenly fading away, as if he was falling into a tunnel below the surface. He was losing consciousness. The first thing he was able to hear after a while was a distant ticking from a clock nearby. He tried to open up his right eye, but the light was still pretty intense. After a few seconds, he was finally able to recognize the shapes of the things surrounding him. He obviously was lying on a bed, and he could suddenly feel pain all over his chest and ribs. He could also feel something unfamiliar in his windpipe, and the rhythm of his breathing seemed synchronized to some noisy machine next to the bed. He was intubated. Apparently he must have been unconscious for a while. He tried unsuccessfully to make a sound. He looked around to gather information about where he was. He definitely was in a clinic or a hospital. He recognized the smell from the few times he had to go to medical institutions in the past. He heard footsteps through the door. Someone was coming in a hurry. The nurse rushed inside the room and went straight to look at his face. She grabbed a penlight and checked the pupil of his eye. She checked his respiration through the monitor and used a stethoscope to validate. Then she left while staring at a paperboard with a concerned look on her face. She came back 12 minutes later with a woman who appeared to be the doctor. "Easy there," she said, as she noticed the agitated way he was moving his eyes around. Then she looked back at the nurse. "Have you checked his breathing pattern too?" The nurse nodded. "Sir, you're at the Hospital of Geneva. You just came out of a coma that lasted a month. The nurse Janine is going to make a proper verification, and then you'll go through a brain scan and I'll see you tomorrow." Geneva? He thought. What am I doing in Geneva? The numerous hours spent without moving a muscle really diluted his capacity to stay awake, even under the incredible stress of not knowing the whys and the whos. Before he passed out completely, he remembered Nurse Janine cleaning him, cutting his beard, and providing him with a clean manicure. For certain she was doing more than you would expect from a nurse. He woke up the same way he did the day before, with pain and a blurry vision. At this point, he couldn't tell the reality from the nightmares. But this, in front of his eyes, felt very real. He could feel the breeze from the AC on his forehead. He heard whispering, the same voices he could hear when he was unconscious. How many people are in the room? He thought. Then, the doctor's voice as she entered the room covered everyone's murmuring. "Here he is, the luckiest man alive," she shouted. She sounded just like those masters of ceremony when they're just about to entertain the crowd, the best way they know how. And judging by her excitement, the event is going to be a blast. "I'm not going to lie to you, Mr. Florence. We really thought you wouldn't recover from that accident. But ever since you opened up your eyes, your vitals are showing nothing but progress and incredible results. You truly are a walking miracle." He could now completely see the people in the room. A woman was sitting right next to the bed, holding his hand. She must have been in her early 40s. Standing behind her, there was an older guy, a grey suit and tie. He had both his hands on the lady's shoulders, massaging them with excitement. Right next to him, an equally old lady was putting her right hand on the lady's left shoulder. They must have been a couple. Something about them gave him grandparents' vibe, but not him. Then whose? "Who's that? Who's Mr. Florence?" he asked. They all broke out laughing. Even the doctor couldn't help but smile, as if he had told a hilarious joke. The lady on his side couldn't stop laughing, and then she said, "Oh, honey, I don't even know where you find the strength to make those jokes. You always make me laugh, even after you gave us the scare of our life." Find out what happens after that in the next release of 9727 the book.